You're listening to the Nerd to Know Media Network. Join us at nerdtoknowmedia.com.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Game Corner, hosted by Kieran Calcone as always. And this week I am joined by our first comedian on the show, Alex Byrne. Is it Alex Byrne or Alex J. Byrne, just in case people are looking you up?
Well, it depends who's asking, I suppose. Alex J. Byrne, I suppose, would be the one that I go by on Facebook. So, yeah, we'll go with Alex J. Byrne. Thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you so much for reaching out to us. So, how have you been doing? I imagine, since the lockdown started, your livelihood's been impacted a bit, right?
Yeah, it has, because I'm doing the stand-up comedy as a hobby because, it's hard to get paid doing that, to be honest. But I'd also work, as an entertainer. I do, children's entertainment, magic balloons and all that type of thing. And I'd also do, hosting events for adults kind of entertainment as well. So that industry has been massively affected as a whole, both in terms of trying to earn with the entertainment work for the children, and there's no stand-up gigs at all.
And I've got to ask, because I'm sure it's the first thing you get asked when you introduce yourself. How does anyone become a comedian?
And the way I did it was, I was doing some courses in the Gaiety. So back in 2015, I started doing some kind of part-time evening course in the Gaiety and different kind of acting and theater type of thing. So when I was doing that, and just for whatever reason, I used to just go in, kind of make comedic sketches and kind of do different funny things.
Yeah.
And I completed the course and I didn't really know what to do. So I asked some of the teachers there, what should I do? And they suggested that I do the stand-up comedy part-time course there because they just felt that it was something I'd be good at, because I said I was quite comedic. And also one of my fairly close friends was asking me to do comedy for quite a while before that. And his exact words were, if I didn't do stand-up comedy, he wouldn't speak to me again. So that was, I suppose, the push that I needed.
So that's how you become a
just from
comedian. You
there,
get threatened into it.
Of course. And then you start telling jokes, and then they're like, what have I unleashed on the world? But I did that course from there, and just went from there, doing the gigs, and I've loved it. It's been a lot of fun.
Okay, so at the top of the show, you mentioned that you do all kinds of events, like kids parties and stand-up and that kind of stuff. Obviously, lockdown aside, what was an average week for you? What kind of events do you do?
Well, on every week for me, when there's work available, so primarily your busy months would be kind of May with all the communions, and then you'd have a lot of work over Christmas. So
Communions, really?
Yeah, communions are very busy for the kids. You wouldn't believe the amount of families that would hire the children's entertainer for communions.
Okay, all right. I would have thought that communions would be a bit sacred, you know?
Yeah, but apparently that's only related to the church afterwards. I think it's no holds barred.
Okay.
And I always see when I'm doing the events, I see all of the kids in their communion gear, and they have these 3-piece suits, and I always think back to my lovely knitted cardigan that my mother knitted for me for my communion.
Yeah. I have seen a lot of sympathy posts going out to all of the kids who aren't getting their confirmations and communions because of the lockdown, and they're all bemoaning about the money they're not going to get and all that kind of stuff.
I feel their pain.
So, I have to imagine that your industry isn't incredibly adaptive to just sort of working from home. So how have you been managing since all this started?
Well, since all this started, I've just been kind of around. To be honest, I've enjoyed the time because life has been so busy and there's been a lot of things to do. So although the lockdown the whole coronavirus is horrible, and I'd love it to pass as soon as possible, it has been an element of, I have enjoyed being at home. I'm here with my dogs, and I'm, cleaning, cooking, and playing a lot of video games too, which is why I reached out when I saw the podcast as well. Because when I was a child, especially, I followed the normal kind of suit as a child. So I had my collection of PlayStation 1 games, which was a very large collection of PlayStation 2 games, relatively large collection of PS3 games, then a short collection of PlayStation 4 games, the natural cycle, I think, of growing.
Yeah. I think that's it. Isn't it funny how, as a kid,
gaming as well.
I'm not sure if you felt this, but as a kid, it felt like you had to pick a side with the consoles. You're either a PlayStation kid or you're a Nintendo kid, or what was the other one? Was it where the Xbox is
Oh, they
free in
had
there,
like
or like
Dreamcast and stuff when we
Dreamcast,
were
Sega?
kids.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Dreamcast, that was it.
So you're
Yeah,
still
I
kind
remember
of
that.
you're still working through these back on the PlayStation then, like.
Yeah, and to be honest, I've always been a PlayStation guy. Like, I'm here, and I still have the 4 consoles as well.
Mm.
4 working consoles.
Well, the fact that they're
From one to
working makes
four.
them very valuable.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, then, just before we get into the games, because you've just mentioned you do variety of events, all that kind of stuff, where can people listening at home find you?
Well, I'm on Facebook on a personal page if you're looking for any kind of entertainment, business
Mm.
work, just at Alex J. Byrne. But I also have my comedian page, which I don't use as much as I probably should. Of it's a very modest name. It's the Great Alex Byrne, which is a modest name I come up with myself.
Well, I mean, you got to start with confidence, like.
Absolutely. That's what they say about confidence. Confidence and honesty. Once you can fake either of those, you've made it.
Well, I hope you're just being honest about the details where they can find you then.
Of course, of course. That part I am always honest about.
All right. On that humble note, we'll move into the games you've been playing. So, what games you've been playing since the lockdown started? You mentioned you have 3 in particular, actually, that you've been playing since the lockdown.
Yep, 3. I've actually played exactly 3 games since the lockdown started, and they even have the numbers 1, 2, and 3 in them, and they're all my first playthroughs of each game. I played Red Dead 1, Red Dead 2, and Witcher 3. And the way I actually started was when lockdown was starting, right as everything was starting to shut down, I said, right, I'm not working, so I'm going to go up to Smith's and basically get a game and see what I can play to keep me entertained during lockdown. I had no idea what I was going to buy. So I was looking around at these different games, so what should I do? And I saw Red Dead Redemption 2 was on sale for €35. So I said, look, I've heard a lot of good things about this game, so I'll go home and play this and queue about a 10-hour download of content.
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, like, it's the price of, like, getting some 500 hours worth of decent content after the fact, though. Like,
Yeah, of course.
like, it's. I don't even know when, because I'm not as much of a gaming expert as I like to say. I don't bluff as well as you. But, like, at what point did downloads for a game you physically own become a thing? Like, that seems to be a contradiction of sorts, like.
Yeah, I think I could be mistaken, but I don't remember it being a thing before the PlayStation 4. I just remember, you get your game, you get your disc, you'd open the box, pop it in, and away you go. But with the PlayStation 4, it seems to be a case of that you install the game and they got to download and the install seems to take longer because they're such big games. And also they're updating all the time as well. So you go and play a game you haven't played for a few weeks and all of a sudden it's like updating the new versions before you could use it.
Yeah, I know. It's like just the amount of times, like, because my brother has an Xbox One, and the amount of times you just fancy a game, and like that bar comes up, and you're like, oh
Yeah.
god, I'll go have a bath or something, I guess.
Exactly. You want to play a game? Great. You can have it in 4 hours.
Well, with that optimism out of the way towards the gaming industry, I believe, take me through, you've been playing Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2. I haven't actually played these, so like, what's the kind of those games in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, basically, they're made by Rockstar, the same as the Grand Theft Auto games. And the way I would describe the people is it's basically Grand Theft Auto with horses. It's very story driven and it's very, you're going around your outlaws. It's set in the Wild West, so they have different stories. And also, which is funny, I played Red Dead Redemption 2 first, but Red Dead Redemption 2 was actually set before Red Dead Redemption 1, so it actually worked out quite well. So there's basically a gang called the Vanderlyn Gang, and they're these notorious outlaws in the Wild West. And Red Dead Redemption 2, basically you play as a character called Arthur Morgan, where you're in the last days of the Vanderlyn Gang and you're seeing everything there and what they were like and what they were doing. And then in the first game, which happens after the second game, you play as another character called John Marston, who was in that gang as well. But now his family have basically been taken, and you have to track down the rest of your gang members and kill them in order to get your family back.
Okay, so I think something worth bringing up about this is that even though I haven't played the Red Dead games, when Red Dead Redemption 2 came out, it was like a phenomenon. You couldn't, like, I knew people who turned up late to work because of they were doing those train robberies. I've known people who've just disappeared into the game and, like, gotten really attached to their horse. So what is so fascinating about Red Dead Redemption 2 in particular?
for Red Dead Redemption 2, and I'll go on record and say I had the same thing because I knew guys that I was working with at the time when Red Dead Redemption, easy for me to say, when Red Dead Redemption 2 came out. I mean, they took 2 weeks off work just so they could go and play that game. And having played it myself, I mean, yeah, it's true. Like, having played it myself, like, I'll go on record and say, personally, it is the best game I've ever played.
Wow, that is high praise for somebody who's had all the PlayStations. Like,
yeah, and the reason being is the way I describe to people is it's hard to put into words because it's one of those, if you play, you're just like, it's such a good experience because everything about it is amazing. You have the story, which is absolutely phenomenal. I said if they made a movie about this game, it would easily win an Oscar. The story is incredible. The characters are incredible. The acting, the gameplay, the whole vibe of everything. The world is incredible. Like, you can go around the world and like you have all these different areas with different places and different fields. And there's so much to do. Like, you can go into any building, you can go hunting, you can go basically working for selling stuff at merchants, you can go and do all these side quests and take down bandit camps, whatever you like. So, and what is amazing that they managed to do in the game that I personally myself haven't experienced in another game is, when you play a game and it feels like, okay, I'm in this world, but this world feels like these characters are just here just to talk to the main character to give you quests. This feels like I've never experienced a game like you are in the real world. So like you could, go away from the game for a few hours and come back and you would feel like the world has kind of moved on without you. People have done their own stuff. Like, you're in camp, and when you're in your camp, all these characters have different conversations about things that have happened between them and their lives. And for me, this is a big thing as well. They change their clothes each day as well. So you see them the next day, they're wearing different clothes and they're discussing things. They get haircuts. So it's not just your character, it's everybody, and everything is alive. Like, you can go and you can speak to anybody in the game. Nothing is off limits, and you can choose how you want to actually be in the game. You can choose to be basically an outlaw, a bad guy, or you can actually choose to be a good guy, and it will affect what happens in the game and how people treat you. Like, for example, say if you're notorious in the game for being a bad guy and robbing places, you'll go to a town and they won't serve you or anything. Like, the people will be afraid of you. But if you're a good guy, you'll go into town and people will be nice and you'll get like discounts and shop and stuff like that. So that level of continuity and everything like that as well is just, I think that's mind blowing. The fact it feels like this is actually, a real person in a real world, and all these characters, exist when this person isn't here. And as well as the story, like, the story is absolutely phenomenal. I recommend anybody to play it because it's incredible. And I've never said this about a game before. It got me so emotional.
really?
Yeah, it's extremely emotional, like, because there's different things that happen in the game, and I've always played a game like, okay, this is cool and this is that, but I was sitting there and I was like, my God, this is really pulling at the heartstrings.
Okay, and like, so it's customizable and it's immersive. So basically, it's a perfect lockdown game.
It is, and it really feels like you're a real person because you have your character, like, you have to feed him or else he'll start to lose health. If you're wearing, say, like a big coat and it's warm outside, he'll start to lose health because he's too warm, and vice versa. If he's too cold and you're, like, say, wearing like a short sleeve shirt, he'll start to lose health because it's too cold. You have to feed the horse as well. And one thing I love in the game as well, there's these different bathhouses, and if you don't go to the bathhouses and wash regularly, you'll get flies start following you around as you go around the world. Yeah, it's that detailed.
God, it sounds more and more like The Sims every minute.
It's The Sims, but with cowboys.
Well, I mean, they should put that on the box. I know a lot of people who'd buy it just based on that. Okay, and sorry, but before you go any further, I got to ask, you mentioned it's customizable. What's your character like then?
Oh, well, in terms of the online, I haven't really played the online much, but in the actual game, your character is a guy, his name is Arthur Morgan, so he's an outlaw, and he's been with this gang since he was a child. The leader is a guy called Dutch Vanderland, and he basically brought him in when he was a child, as well as all the other members of the gang. So Arthur is kind of his right-hand man, and you see, the game starts that they're in the mountains on the run from the law, and the game starts where basically you're after doing robbery on a ferry, but it's after going wrong, so they're on the run and they have to keep relocating camps, and they have to basically organize new plots to try and get money. So your character is basically the guy who's trying to help this guy get what he needs to be. But as the game goes on, he kind of starts to realize, well, maybe this isn't what I actually want from life. So it's amazing to see this guy you play is this guy Arthur, from where he is at the start to his transformation throughout the game. And it all depends on what basically happens to him, how you play the game, and how he feels toward other people as well.
Okay, and like, you've given us a lot of information there, but like, because you said you played Red Dead Redemption 1 as well. Is that on par with this new one, or?
It is a very, very good game. It's an excellent game, actually. It's on a PlayStation 3, so Red Dead 2 is on the PS4, then Red
Okay.
Dead 1 is on the PS3. I think it came out in 2010, so it does have some of the limitations of the PS3 compared to the PS4 in terms of graphics and like the whole world feel. But again, it's an excellent game and it's a very good story. This guy, he has to basically turn against his old friends to try and get his family back. And he's a great character as well. He plays a guy called John Marston. Very strong game, again, very character driven. He is a great character. But for me, Red Dead 2 edges it just because I personally myself prefer the story and I prefer the character in Red Dead Redemption 2. But I'd recommend both games to anybody. I think they're both absolute masterpieces.
Well, I mean, that is kind of a thing because I know enough about Rockstar to know with the Grand Theft Auto and all that kind of stuff that
Mm,
they're really good at building working worlds, but quite often
they
the
are.
story is just something to hang that upon. Like, so they've
Yeah.
really nailed the story with this Red Dead 2 property this time. Like,
Yeah. In Red Dead 1 and especially Red Dead 2, the story is absolutely phenomenal because you'll feel so many emotions and things that happen. So, like, things will happen again and you'll be like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. Like, and when it came to the end, when I was fighting the main kind of villain at the end, I've never played a game so much where I was like, I want to kill this guy.
and can I ask, because I'm stuck on the kind of idea of it being sort of somewhat customizable, what's the craziest thing that's happened to you on your adventures in Red Dead Redemption 1 or 2?
On the adventures in Red Dead Redemption 1 or 2, in terms of customization or just in
In
general with
terms
the
of
world?
anything, I'm assuming it's a working world. So did anything weird happen? Did a horse chase you or something like that?
There are some weird bits. I've only experienced two glitches where basically doors didn't open, but there are like some very unique places. Like there's one village where basically the people are cursed and they're being attacked by scurvy dogs. And if you try and speak to them, they basically tell you to feck off, basically. And I tried to, start one of them and I decided to punch one of them because he was basically telling me I got to feck off. And all of a sudden, the whole village turned on me and started trying to chase me with shotguns.
Oh, like in the old Legend of Zelda game when the chickens come after you, that kind of thing?
Yeah, something similar.
Yeah, a friend of mine who is also a parent has like gone down the Red Dead Redemption 2 rabbit hole. I may have told this story on the show before. I apologize if I have. But basically, his 7-year-old daughter watches it with him, and she gets really
Yeah.
excited when she sees a deer. And not nice thing has happened to deer in this game. So every time he,
Yes.
skins a deer or whatever, he goes, "Oh, Viola, your friend's out the window," and she runs over, and he like quickly gets rid of it as soon as he can. Like,
Yeah, and it's very graphic. Like you see the
yeah,
deer
yeah,
lying there
yeah.
without the skin. And that's another thing. Like it's not just a case of that goes into your inventory and you have it then. Like
Mm.
it's so kind of realistic in the sense that you have to pick it up, put it on your horse, bring it to the merchants and sell it there. Same with your weapons. Like in terms of having your weapons, they're stored on the horse. So if you get off your horse and go into a mission where you have to shoot and you haven't brought your guns with you, the game space, you're like, well, sorry about you. You left them on the horse.
All right. Well, then I think certainly you've given us a good sense of Red Dead now. But what about The Witcher 3? Now, I believe your friend Saoirse was on a few episodes ago. She told us a lot
Yeah.
about Gwent, but I
Mm.
still don't have a good handle on what Witcher 3 is. So take us through that.
Well, Witcher 3, I'm still playing through it at the moment. I'm not sure how far I'm into it because game is a mammoth. It's huge.
Mm.
Basically, the best way I could describe it is you're playing as this guy called Geralt of Rivia,
Right.
who's a Witcher. And what Witchers basically are, they're these kind of mutated, I suppose, for want of a better term, bounty hunters who basically they go down and they hunt monsters for coins. Say a monster is terrorizing the village, they get a Witcher, and the Witcher goes, kills the monster, brings back, say, like its head, and say, right, I've killed your monster, and they get
Yeah.
coins. So Witchers primarily care about money, and that's their way of making it. But in terms of a story, Geralt is chasing this girl who's basically his adopted daughter, and it's his quest straight again to try and find where his adopted daughter is, while kind of encountering people from the first two games, and also going around the world trying to complete these contracts for witches and stuff like that. So it's extremely immersive. It's one of those games where the story is great and it's fantastic. But I mean, you could clock up easily 30 or 40 hours just doing side quests.
Okay, all right. Now, I've got to ask because I've heard so much about The Witcher 3, but can you just start there, or do you need to have a notion of what's going on for the first two games?
That's what I did. I started on Witcher 3. I'd never played the first two games, and it does help to have played the first two games, I found, because you're meeting these characters, and your character's kind of speaking to them, saying, oh, hey, how's it going? Do you remember this and that? And I'm sitting here like, what are these people talking about? What is nice, though, is if you don't know who the characters are, they kind of give you, like, an inventory of characters and, like, how your Geralt knows them and where they've been and stuff like that. But it is beneficial to play the first two games, but I suppose the only downside to that is you got to play through two massive games in order to get to this game.
Yeah, I suppose. And like you mentioned, it was immersive. So what really hooked you in about this one?
I suppose what really hooked me in about it was, again, just the whole big open world. There's a feel to it, and there's so much to do. And it's just a variety of missions you can do. Like, there's different monsters. You got like your werewolves, your vampires. They even have these tree monsters, these kind of ghouls and these ghosts. Everything that's kind of inside. And again, it's a very strong character. Like the guy you play as Geralt. I'm not sure you've seen the Witcher TV series with Henry Cavill. He's a very
I
cool
have
character.
seen
He's
it.
just kind of
Yeah.
a guy. Oh, then you know he's excellent in it as well. He's such a great character, and he gets the character spot on compared to the games. And it's the whole kind of concept of it's like being a fantasy kind of bounty hunter. It's set in the 13th century, and you're going around on your horse and you're catching these guys down. You got your different swords, and you have to, customize your swords with different things, and you can use your magic against these monsters. And we'll give you like a list of, okay, this works here and that works there. And it's also, there's a slight element of RPG to it in the sense that like you'll have different moments in the game and you'll encounter different people. And it's up to you to decide what way you want to interact with these people. And that will determine what happens later on in the game.
Okay, and like Red Dead, is it like how much of your input goes into it? Like, is the story locked in, or is there kind of a lot of variety? Like,
There is a lot of variety. It's the same as Red Dead Redemption 2 in the sense that there are different endings you can get depending on how you played the game.
right?
Like one thing I will say that is quite funny, and without spoiling too much, there are two kind of love interests in the game. Like there's these two women that Geralt has been in love with, and throughout the game you have to choose which one you want to basically put Geralt with.
Right.
But what's funny is, and I was put wise to this actually by my brother who had played the game before, it's very funny in the sense that you have to choose between them, but if you choose both, they'll basically both bring you into this room and they'll leave you there to basically fend for yourself. It's like if you try and be smart and chase both of them, you'll end up with absolutely nothing.
Oh, I see. So there's actual consequences for you
There are
kind of
actual
being a chancer. Like,
consequences.
okay, I must say that is incredibly refreshing to hear about.
It is. And I like that because he was saying, what are you? And I was like, well, I'm doing this and doing that. And he was like, don't do that. Why? Because this will happen. And I was like, oh, okay. Actually, put me was that I better replay that last part of the game.
Well, my only experience with The Witcher is the Netflix series, but yeah, if the female characters in the game are anything like that, yeah, I can't imagine they'd suffer fools gladly. Like,
Absolutely, the sorceresses they don't let anybody mess with them in that game, and it's two of the characters that you saw in the series. If anybody's watched the series, your main two love interests will be Triss and Yennefer.
I see. Okay, that makes sense now.
So if what is it in terms of spoilers? If I tell the story of Witcher 1 and 2, will that be ruining things for anybody?
We'll tell you what then, just because for people listening at home who may have heard of them but may not have played them, why don't you instead tell us, is it an easy game to pick up, and what's the kind of appeal of it?
It's a very easy game to pick up, and the appeal is that you're in this, I suppose, almost like World of Warcraft. You're in this fantasy world where everybody has like these different places, and it's a massive open world game. And there's these different areas, and every area has a completely different feel to it. And your character is kind of renowned and you're famous. So if you've ever wanted to play, just I suppose, kind of badass, kind of mercenary bounty hunter for hire in this kind of fantasy world where you can just get completely lost in and just make your own choices and basically decide how you would see this character and what he wants to do, going around and picking up coin, picking up these weapons, and going through a very immersive and very diverse story. It's a game for you. And you, again, with the RPG element, you can decide how this guy treats people and what he does and everything like that. Even something as simple as when you get a Witcher contract, as they're called, when you're hunting a monster, you can try and argue and barter over the price and how much you should get paid, depending on how big you think the monster is and how hard the job is. So it's almost like living a world inside this game, which I think is fantastic to do.
Okay, and like, because I know not everyone kind of would be up on their fantasy, like it's even though it's kind of more widespread now than it has ever been, it's still a bit of a niche thing to some, because we brought this up on the Dungeons and Dragons episode. Would you enjoy this if you aren't particularly interested in fantasy?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I've never played World of Warcraft. I just know what it's like, and I've only ever sat in one Dungeons and Dragons session. So for me personally, I found it very easy to pick up because I enjoy the whole kind of adventure style of it as well. Like, you don't have to be like completely immersed in the whole kind of fantasy world. There is a lot of fantasy and magic, but if you enjoy an adventure and kind of just, I suppose, on a very basic level, going around whacking things with swords, you'll enjoy it that way.
That's very true. And let me ask you something before we wrap. You've picked 3 very immersive games with big, wide worlds full of variety and customizable kind of characters and all that kind of stuff. Why do you find
Yeah.
those kind of games appealing?
I find them kind of appealing because I like having the freedom in the game to go around and really kind of, I suppose, explore and choose which way you want to play the game. Like, I think if a game is linear, it can suffer a little bit because I know, obviously, a linear game, Batman Arkham Asylum was excellent, but I prefer the likes of Arkham City where you could explore the city and stuff like that. So you having the choice to kind of do these side quests, like you really feel like you can get attached to this character, I think, because a big thing for me when it comes to movies, TV shows, books, games, anything is if there's a good character and I feel like I care about the main character and the side characters as well. Once that development is there and I feel like they're in a world that I care about and I can completely, I suppose, get lost in, for want of a better term, is that's the broad appeal to me because it's this kind of big commitment. And I'm saying, if I'm going to play this game for X amount of hours, I really want to get the full kind of, I suppose, immersion that I'm looking for.
Okay, so you wouldn't be happy with like an on the rails sort of game, even if the kind of gameplay itself was good. If there wasn't that sort of level of interactivity, it wouldn't appeal to you as much.
It would still appeal to me to an extent. Like I like the spot, like for the Batman Arkham Asylum, I did love that game. Like they are great games, but I'm saying this is kind of the exact game that would appeal to me. That's why I suppose I got so excited when I saw PlayStation 5 is going to focus on more kind of big kind of multiplayer, not multiplayer, single player kind of games like this. One thing I will say that the only downside is when you first take these games on, and there's so much to do and so much it can be very overwhelming at first, because initially I was like, when I took Witcher up especially, I was like, what do I do? Where do I go? There's so much. But then once you get a few hours in, you're right, I got to go over here, and if I put that there and apply this weapon here, this will help me do this and that over there. So there is kind of a slight learning curve to it, but I think if you're used to games and you're interested in kind of just getting lost and immersed in the game, these are perfect for you.
Yeah, Saoirse mentioned that. You talked about Breath of the Wild and stuff and how there were games that were almost too big, and that kind of stressed her out because she just needed to know where to go and the game wouldn't tell her,
Yes, of course. Luckily with these, you can, they have the little mini map that shows, go over here and talk to this person. It's like, I can do that.
All right, we are nearly out of time. Is there anything you'd like to say while we're on the air, just before we wrap?
No, that's all for me. Just advice to you, anybody here listening, if you're looking for games to play that you haven't played before, Red Dead 1, Red Dead 2, and Witcher 3, can't recommend them enough. My first playthroughs and all of them happened during lockdown, and I suppose it was nice just to connect with gaming again. I'd been playing FIFA for so many years, and once I got back to actual other games, I was like, oh my God, video games are fun. What happened?
Yeah, I know. You do. It's funny, actually, playing video games as adult. You do have this sort of, you lost your way with it and then rediscovered it again kind of relationship.
Yes, and it's been so nice. So I suppose, although everything that's going on is horrible, that's been one, I suppose, nice element, just chilling out, playing games with the dogs, and just, I suppose, anybody listening, if you want to pick up some games, they're downloadable. I think PlayStation 4 especially, I'm not sure about Xbox, is having a lot of sales in these games, so they're well worth checking out. And just, apart from everybody, I just hope everybody listening is just staying happy and staying healthy.
Excellent. And one last time, Alex, where can people who might be interested in contacting you or booking you find you?
They can find me on Facebook. My name on Facebook is Alex J. Byrne, but if they want to contact my comedian page, it is the very modestly named The Great Alex Byrne.
All right. Well, thank you very much, The Great Alex Byrne. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks very much, Ken. Really appreciate it.
Alright, so you're listening to the podcast, you're like, hey, I'm not in Ireland, how do I get in touch? Well, TuneIn has you covered. That's how you can check us out live when we're on the radio. You go to TuneIn and download the app, or you can check out the live streams on nerdtoknowmedia.com or Phoenix 92.5 FM. If you want to get in contact with us, it's very easy. Nerd to Know Media everywhere. Nerd to Know Media on Twitter, Nerd to Know Media Instagram, Nerd to Know Media on Twitch, Nerd to Know Media at gmail.com if you want to reach out via email. Hope to hear from you soon.
Are you a nerd? Do you like hearing about a bizarre range of topics from the world of nerd? Does your heart and hairstyle still belong in the nostalgic 90s? Are you a sucker for spooky weirdo things? Well, whether you're a hardcore nerd or a vanilla ice baby, Straight Outta Canto is the podcast radio show for you! Straight Outta Canto, that's Kanto, Ireland's #1 show for nerd culture, nightmares, nostalgia, and more. Straight Outta Canto.
And welcome back to the Game Corner. Thanks so much to Alex Byrne, who was on our first half. Now, for our second guest this week, we have a very good friend of mine on the show, Neil Cochrane, who is an online moderator. How are you doing, Neil?
I'm doing good, Kane. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show. Is this your first time doing a podcast?
No, I've done it. I've a couple of friends. We used to run a podcast talking about films and things, and we kind of just grew out of it. Just our work schedules and things were conflicting. But no stranger to podcasting. But never done a gaming podcast before.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for giving up the time. What was your first podcast called, in case anyone wants to go look it up?
Puny Gods. So
Puny Gods.
it was a reference to the Hulk and
Yeah. Smashing
Smash
Loki around the place.
Yeah. So it was a Puny Gods podcast. We just used to get together and we used to challenge each other to go and watch films that maybe we wouldn't normally watch. I was more of a sci-fi fan, and then one of the guys was more of a horror fan, and he'd be like, "Yeah, go and watch this horror slasher from the '80s," and I'd be like, "There's no phasers in this. What is this?" So it was an interesting dynamic we had.
I know what you mean. I'm on another one called Anime Crash Course, where the guy who hosts it, Kev, challenges us to go watch like a weird anime we might never have heard of. And this month, it's one about a maid in someone's house who's also a dragon. So it does kind of push you out of your comfort zone a bit.
Yeah, it really does. I don't know if you've ever seen. There was an old film they made me watch called Samurai Cop.
I know it through Red Letter Media, but I've never watched it. What's your experience of it?
It was ridiculous, man. You've seen more professional filmmaking from students. It was just so. Oh, I don't know. The cuts and the audio and everything. The acting was all just so terrible. But these are the kind of things that my friends love.
But there is like an art to it. It's like a film has to be over a certain threshold of bad to hold your attention, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's up there with Sharknado. It's just ridiculous enough to be amusing in some way.
But like there is a line, like, because I caught a bit of like Sharknado 4 on the horror channel, and once they're trying to make it bad on purpose, for some reason the magic just isn't there. Like,
yeah, you kind of get used to it.
Yeah, exactly. So, well then, before we get into the games and stuff, how have you been coping since the lockdown started? I appreciate you work from home, so has it impacted your life in any particular way?
Yeah, I mean, anytime I've had this conversation with people, I tend to tell them the first thing that I usually say to them is that I have no complaints. I can't complain. Nothing's really changed for me, so I feel incredibly lucky. Given what has happened to a lot of people. But I work from home anyway, so nothing's really changed in that regard. We've become a lot more busy because I work for a video hosting website, and whenever educational institutions closed and personal trainers had to close, and businesses and offices, they're all communicating by video now. So if anything, I got busier work-wise. It's been crazy, but yeah, I just can't. I wouldn't have left the house very much anyway. So I do my day's work and then I watch my shows. I'm obsessed with TV and box sets and movies and gaming and that sort of thing. So yeah, nothing's really changed for me, but obviously mindful that it's changed for a lot of people. So you won't hear too many complaints out of my lips.
Well, that's exactly it, because we've had a few artists on the show whose like lives just stopped like in half a second. But at the same time, like, Dara, who runs our channel, like he would do similar work to what you do. And when the whole lockdown started, I imagine there was like a huge sudden rush of work that had to be put on your shoulders to adapt websites and all that, not just to the needs of, like you said, videos and stuff, but the fact that everyone is on the internet more, right?
Yeah, that's it. And particularly what we're doing, because the company I work for also do live streaming, and the amount of people who've turned to live streaming, particularly churches. You think of how many churches across America alone,
What,
are
like
now
doing mass
broadcast.
online, like that kind of thing?
Yeah, they're doing their sermons live, could be several times a week, for one church, and that's just churches, you like I say, schools and professors, and they're all doing live classes, so people can just do it from home. And it's been difficult trying to support so many people all of a sudden, but we're coping. We're doing okay. But aside from that, yeah, I told you recently, I recently built a brand new gaming PC because
Yes, I unfortunately we can't show photos on the radio, but it looks superb.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of experience with gaming PCs. I was always more of a console player, but probably because of the kind of work I've fallen into and the kind of people I'm working with who are all used to working from home. A lot of them are online gamers and they've all got their own PCs and they've been gnawing away at me for months. You know, you need to get one of these and we can play this, we can do that. You know, and I just kind of said, okay, darn it, I'll just do it. I just started buying up components. My neighbor would be a big PC builder. He's a big computer geek. he he sold me a really good graphics card, and I kind of just built everything around that. So that's taken up a lot of my focus the last few weeks, and it's only really in the last 2 weeks that I've got it up and running, and it's purring like a kitten. It's beautiful. There's hoses full of green liquid just pumping around it, and there's so many different lights. It's so pretty.
And how would you even learn where would you learn how to build a gaming PC? Like, it seems like a huge undertaking.
Well, it is, but there's so many resources because this is, people have been doing this for a long time. I'm going to be honest, I didn't do a lot of the build. I bought a lot of the components, and my neighbor did most of the building for me. I screwed a few things in here and there, and I provided some screwdrivers, so I wasn't completely useless in the whole process. But now that it's put together, I'm making good use of it. But I've learned a lot while we go. I mean, you start with your case. You get a big enough case for the kind of build that you want to put together. You get your motherboard. Basically, everything plugs into the motherboard, and then you need a power source. Everything plugs into the power source. You just have to make decisions on what kind of build you want, really. How much memory are you going to need, or how good you want your graphics to be. How much cooling are you going to need? This thing has 6 fans in it, but it whispers. You can't hear anything. And then the graphics card actually needs to be water cooled. So I've got a big tank there with all this green. You can pick different colors of liquid. So I picked a green liquid, and it's literally just pumping through the graphics card constantly, and the fans are cooling the liquid as it moves around through the graphics card, and it's so beautiful. I'm staring at it.
I can't wait to see it in person. Like, I from what you've been telling me, the photos obviously don't do it justice. Like,
yeah. Well, we had a few problems with the motherboard that I bought initially. Had some problems with some of the sticks that the RAM plugs into. So I ended up having to replace the motherboard after only a few days. But yeah, it's all up and running now, and you're gonna love it. And I've got the projector screen here. If I want to, I can put it up on the big screen here in my room as well.
so it sounds like you are like prepped in case the lockdown runs for another 6 months. You've got your home cinema gaming system, like.
Yeah, I wish I had it 6 months ago.
But like,
yeah.
that is something like you've done a project and made the most of. I know it hasn't affected your life the same way some other people have, but you've really made the most of the time.
I've tried to, because I've got so many box sets that are now finished. I'm finished with Picard. Picard's done. Better Call Saul's done. I needed something else.
Well, at least you've got that. I'm limited to what's baby appropriate at the best of times. So,
yeah, of course.
But I'll sneak in a few things after she's gone to sleep at like 3 a.m. or something like that.
Lock the door.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, since you brought up Picard, I believe you wanted to talk about Star Trek Online, yes?
Yeah, you haven't experienced this yourself, have you?
No, I must confess, apart from maybe one game on the Nintendo DS, I've never actually, on a board game that we have at home called Star Trek Ascendancy, I've never actually played a Star Trek video game.
Okay, well, I mean, I've played a few, but Star Trek Online is the Star Trek video game. It's an MMORPG.
Right.
So it's basically the way the game works. It's all about your career as an officer. So you create your character. You decide, do you want to be a human? Do you want to be a Vulcan? Do you want to be a Romulan, a Klingon, an alien of some kind? You choose your allegiance. Do you want to be with, Picard and the Federation, or do you want to join the Romulan Empire, the Klingon Empire, whatever it may be? And your missions, there are missions throughout the game, obviously. Go to this planet, do that, fight this guy, go to this planet, beam down, solve this puzzle, collect these items, whatever it may be. That's all just a very small part of the game because it's It's about accumulating technology, accumulating better ships, faster ships, more powerful ships, weapons, consoles, getting the best crew together. Obviously, there's the online aspect where you're playing with your friends, but in terms of non-playable characters, you want to get bridge officers who have certain skills, and you can train them in certain ways. It's so vast. I mean, it's so hard to just sort of sum it up in a few minutes, because there is a console version that I was playing for years, and now I'm back on the PC, kind of starting from the beginning again. But there are players who are so into this that they have 7 or 8 different characters, maybe more, and they're bouncing between these different games that they have. I'm going to develop this guy as a Klingon within the Klingon Federation. I'm going to develop this woman as a Starfleet tactical officer, or I'm going to go for this Ferengi engineer.
So do you only? So actually, tell you what. Actually, I'll back up further, because you and I, we've both kind of been to a lot of the Star Trek eras and that kind of stuff. We're kind of fairly plugged into Star Trek. Would you have to know quite a lot about the franchise to play this game and enjoy it?
Not necessarily, no. There's a certain amount of nostalgia for a fan, because a lot of the original actors come back and did their voices for their characters in the game. Yeah, lots of them. But you could enjoy the aspects of the gameplay and what it involves. You have all these games like Command and Conquer, and where you're going around building an empire and that kind of thing. You don't necessarily have to know a lot about tanks, to enjoy a game like that. Stellaris is another one. It's kind of a build a space empire, colonize planets and all that kind of thing. If you're just into that, exploration and accumulating, having goals constantly, I want a better ship, I want a better crew, you can still enjoy it without being a Star Trek fan. But I think if you're a Star Trek fan, for a while it felt like there was no Star Trek. There was nothing until sort of Discovery came back, brought it back to TV and that sort of thing. So this kind of plugged that gap for a lot of Star Trek fans, because it carried on stories. It was like, this is what happened next.
Yeah, because Enterprise and which I must say, the last season of that was very good. I know this isn't a Star Trek podcast, but it felt like that ended quite abruptly. And then there's the Abrams stuff, but that is parallel. So and even Discovery is kind of a prequel. So you're right. There was this big kind of Doctor Who sized desert of time where nothing was moving forward unless you're into the books and stuff, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, this was the closest thing people had to a show or set in that original universe. So, I think you will enjoy it more if you are a Star Trek fan, and especially when some of these characters come back and do their voices again.
You've got to let me know, kind of which characters are we talking?
Oh, where to start? Worf, Geordi.
Oh, proper ringers, like recognizable characters, like.
Oh yeah. Leonard Nimoy did a lot of voice work for it before he passed.
Okay, so this isn't a recent game then.
Oh no. It's been going for could be 10 years, maybe more.
Holy moly, I've never known like an online game, because usually the problem with online games of any kind, like I'm a huge fan of the Empire of War game in Star Wars, is after 2 years the multiplayer fan base sort of moves on to other things and the game is kind of inoperable. So this is still going strong then.
Oh yes, and it evolves, and it has probably helped that all this new content has come on TV. Discovery, Picard, and that, because that gives them more different ships to bring into the game, or different characters. The likes of Seven of Nine, she would have done voices for it before anyway. Jerry Ryan, the whole Voyager crew basically did voices. The Deep Space Nine crew, most of them have done the voices again. Yeah, there's lots of them. So, but all the new shows has just given them more avenues to explore with new content, and I can't see the game dissipating with its fan base anytime soon.
And I've got to ask, is this an online free-to-play game, or is this like on Steam? Like, is it where would people find it?
Well, it is a free-to-play game. Obviously, there's extra content or things you can buy along the way if you choose to, but you don't have to. It's like anything, you could take shortcuts and you could spend money and you could buy ships and you could buy upgrades and that, but you can get those things through the games. There are events that give away what would be called sort of tier 6 ships. That's like your highest tier of ship. that normally you would have to buy, but you can win them in events, and you can do different things, and you can trade energy credits. You can buy things with digital currency within the game. You can get it. Let me just. It is the developer is. It used to be Perfect World. It's now called Cryptic. Cryptic with a Y. What else? The Arc website. You can download it from Arc, and I think you can get it on Steam. I think there are a few places you can get it. If you just Google Star Trek Online, it's not hard to find.
Okay, and like I know you talked a bit about the gameplay already, but take me through like an average day playing this game, because it's not. I'm guessing it's not like a strictly story-based game, like a Mass Effect game, like.
No, not strictly. So, like I say, when you first start the game, you're given a certain ship and a certain, you'll have one or two bridge officers who come on away missions with you. There would be obviously sort of initial missions that you can do, like kind of like a tutorial. But then beyond that, so when I log in, the first thing I do is check to see if I've had any upgrades while I've been away, because you can set sort of background officers to do certain tasks for you while you're not even at the computer. There's a timer on those, so some of them might take an hour, some of them might take 40 hours. So you could log in one day and go, oh, there's that task I started a few days ago. They've completed it successfully, or they made a complete hames of it, and two of them have died. Who knows? Collect your rewards or your upgrades and move on and assign them to other tasks. You're constantly accumulating. So you've got energy credits, you've got what's called the lithium crystals, you've gold pressed latinum, all these different things, sort of virtual currencies and skill points that you can assign to yourself or other people to learn new abilities. So a very basic player might just have a ship with two weapons, a very basic ship with very low threshold for taking a pounding. Boom, you're dead.
Yeah.
And then there's other players that might have a much more powerful ship with 8 weapons, and it's not even just about the weapons. If you have certain abilities in yourself or your crew members, you can deal damage to other ships without firing a torpedo. It's activate an artificial gravity well and get them sucked into it, or create ghost images, holographic ships to confuse enemy sensors. It's so hard to just sort of sum it up, but yeah, a typical day, like say this morning I got up, I come down, I opened the game, so I checked my duty officers, collected rewards from that. I had a look through all the equipment that I'd gathered recently to make sure that I had the best stuff on the ship. And then I'm looking at my ranking. I'm sitting at rank 23, and I'm only about 100 points away from rank 24. You unlock better ships and better weapons at higher ranks, so it goes up. You're probably level 65 before you kind of have access to most aspects of the game. So those early days are really spent trying to bump up your experience points, which you can do in the storyline missions within the game, or there are side missions you can do. Just you can fight against other players, you can fight against non-playable characters just for the sake of it, just for a few minutes, just to gather some energy credits, some lithium, some experience points, and just boost your character that way. But ship maintenance is one of the big things. You go to these spaceports and you can design your ship. You can change the layout of the ship, how it looks, what color it is, and your uniforms. Everything. There's so much detail in this game. You can get your uniform. You can wear uniforms from, the days of Kirk and Spock, or you can wear uniforms from Voyager. You can get uniforms that aliens wore in one episode of Deep Space Nine, 30 years ago. It's there's so much choice in it. You could spend a lifetime exploring this game.
Okay, and like because Star Trek isn't like a typical like sort of conquering type franchise. I know there's Klingons and stuff, but then what's your kind of goal then? Is it to like just go out into the great unknown like Kirk, or do you have to fight in wars? Like, what's the kind of mission statement?
The gameplay is, that's the one thing that even though the gameplay is enjoyable, a lot of it is combat based. So for a Star Trek game, that's
It's a bit
It's not
iffy.
true to
Yeah.
the natural heart of Star Trek, but
Mm.
there is exploration as well. There are storylines about ancient races that link back to episodes and things that someone mentioned in an episode, and they've kind of picked that up and expanded on it and said, okay, so Data said this back in 1991. Let's pick that and make a whole storyline out of it. And suddenly we're discovering this race of ancient aliens that haven't been around the galaxy for thousands of years, and this is who they are and this is what they do. So there's a lot of puzzles and scientific discoveries, and you find things just when you're walking around and running around, diaries that someone left, from hundreds of years ago, or artifacts from like these dead races. So there is still a lot of that sort of exploration in that. The main purpose of the game is to improve your character and your ship and your crew, but you do that in a variety of ways, and the storylines is just a small part of that. But they are interesting, especially when they bring back some of the old characters, and it's like this is what happened to the politics of the galaxy 20 years after what you saw on TV. It could have gone this way, it could have gone that way. So
Well,
it's
that's just
interesting
it.
as
Like
well.
you said, until Picard came along, that universe hasn't moved forward since Voyager. Like,
Yeah, Nemesis, I suppose it was the last thing, Star Trek Nemesis, the last Next Generation movie. That would have been the very latest thing to happen. Between that and Picard, there's just a big void,
Mm.
And that's what the game kind of explored. Not that it's when new content comes out on TV, it's not that they turn around and change the story and suddenly it's like, oh well, we got that wrong, so it's actually going this way. But they'll just introduce discovery characters and discovery ships and discovery based missions and that sort of thing. So it doesn't interfere, if you know what I mean.
Okay. And like from what you've told me so far, it's clearly made by people who know Star Trek and really care about it. Like,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Um, it was something we noticed. A friend of mine from England was playing it with me the other day. There was a planet we went to, and we found these artifacts from this race, and they were only mentioned once in Star Trek, and it was the language that they apparently spoke. One of the characters in Star Trek: The Next Generation had mentioned that it was a combination of this language and that language, and that was all that was ever mentioned, about these languages. And someone has taken that and made a whole planet. One of those languages comes from this planet, and we're going to go there and we're going to find all this juicy tech and all the stuff that they left behind, and then we're going to find out where they went and what they did, and then they're going to come back, and then they're going to try and destroy us all, and that all came from a single conversation that someone had in an episode of Star Trek, 30, 40 years
well,
ago.
that's just it about Star Trek. There's probably like 2,000 odd episodes or something, but like every one of those episodes is someone's favorite. And in the Star Trek Online, you really have a great form for spitting that off into other things, don't you?
Yeah, and it's great to have people who are fans who are behind the development of the game. It's not like Star Trek Monopoly, who it's just Monopoly of just put some Star Trek names on the board and try to appeal to a fandom. It's actually
Yeah, I know. We had a Doctor Who Monopoly like in the shop for a while, and instead of locations, they literally just had like different doctors. And you get the
Right.
sense that like, well, someone just Googled Doctor Who and plugged that in. It wasn't made by someone who really cared,
Yeah, and I think that's important to a lot of gamers as well. Especially if a game is made from a franchise, or even when a movie is made from a game, you want someone who was involved in what you fell in love with to be involved in developing it in a different way.
Mm. Well, that's just it, because it's a bigger conversation that we have time to get into. But like, when you invest in a franchise, be it like the Avengers or like a Star Trek or whatever, like, and then something is made that feels like it hasn't been as well researched or well crafted as the time you've kind of put into it, it kind of
Yeah.
shows and it bothers you straight away, doesn't it? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
so we've got about 1 or 2 minutes left on the clock. Is there anything you'd like to say about the game before we wrap, or even anything else you'd want to recommend?
Well, that's where my focus has been. Like I said, I've only had this thing for a few weeks. I tried Battlefield. I'm terrible at Battlefield. See these Battlefields and Call of Duties and that.
Mm.
I die before I even know what direction I'm facing.
I find those very stressful.
So therefore, I've concluded that those games are the most realistic games. that are ever made. Because if you drop me in the middle of a battlefield, it wouldn't end well for me. You know.
Yeah, that's what I found with the Call of Duties. It's like unless you're a certain type of gamer, you learn very quickly that you would not have lasted long in World War II.
Yeah. So, I mean, the games that I enjoy the most are the ones that you kind of have to do a lot of deep thinking about, and strategize about. So the likes of Star Trek Online and the one I mentioned before, Stellaris, that's another very good one. It's another is it free to, no, it's not free to play, but it's not expensive. Again, it's get out into the galaxy and explore and colonize new worlds and meet new races and develop your social, your economic, your politics, all these different things. And I like having those things to think about, rather than just blowing things up. But blowing things up is a lot of fun too. So in that way, Star Trek Online is perfect for me, because it's not just about blowing things up. It's about the means by which you're going to blow things up.
Yes. And I've got to ask, because I feel like I have to ask this every time there's like a free-to-play game. You don't run into obstacles if you're not paying to play, like too much.
No, not at all. You don't. The gameplay is there for everyone. So you don't have to pay to access certain levels. But if you're impatient, you could just pay for a better ship rather than earning it, and going and working and gathering enough energy credits within the game to pay for it, So
Yeah.
no, none of the gameplay is restricted financially. So there are people who have played that game for years and have great ships, and they've never spent a penny.
Okay, because I know that a few years ago I came across like a mobile Star Trek game. I'm trying to look up the name of what it was now. Oh yeah, Star Trek Trexels, where it was so steeped into the monetization that like you had to do a 5-minute game to get like one crystal, and you needed like 100 crystals to unlock a new planet. Like there's none of that kind of malarkey.
No, definitely not. You can work your way through. The game will give you new ships as you rank up to tier 5, and you can make a living with a tier 5 ship, but then they'll run events 3 or 4 times a year, and the reward for taking part in the event could be a tier 6 ship. So you can still run through all the missions, you can still access all the planets and all the gameplay features without buying these awesome new ships. It's more of a new toy, So I don't mind spending a bit of money here and there for a better ship. Not everybody wants to, maybe not everybody can, and that's fine. You're still going to be able to get your hands on those
It
ships.
won't interrupt your fun, like.
No, it definitely won't. It's not like here you're going to pay 50 quid to talk to Worf here in the game. No, it's not. There's no meet and greet. It's just they're all there and you can interact with them, and that's fine.
Excellent. Well, on that very promising note, I think we will wrap this episode. Neil, thank you very much for taking the time to appear on the show. It's been great having you.
Thanks for inviting me, and it's good to hear from you. I'm glad to hear that. How's the show doing? You're running this a good month now, aren't you? Maybe longer.
Yeah, a good month or two now. Bit of behind the scenes. This episode's actually a bit backlogged. We're recording it a week or two before it'll go out. So,
okay.
Yeah, we're gonna take a break at around episode 10. Just to kind of plan out the next leg of it. But it's been a great experience, and it's been great to kind of meet new people and catch up with everyone just to find out what they're doing with, like yourself, because like there is a social dynamic to this as well during the lockdown. Just check in if everyone's okay,
Yeah, well, that's it, and that's one of the reasons I got this game on PC is so I could interact with people without leaving the house.
Well then, we'll talk a little bit more off the air, but Neil Cochrane, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you can give up the time to appear again on the show sometime soon.
Absolutely, no problem, thank you.
Excellent. The Game Corner will be back here for our series finale of sorts next week, Friday at 1 o'clock. Until then, thank you so much for joining us. I've been Kieran Calcone, this has been Neil Cochrane, and we'll be back Friday next week. Bye!
Bye.
Thank you for listening to a Nerd to Know Media production.